and she turned out enough garments over the years to outfit a small army. Pajamas, shirts, table linens, and hand towels, they all came alive in her hands. I think that if her Afghans were laid end to end, they would reach from here to Baudette, Minnesota, where she began her life. Peggy and I had a very simple arrangement over the past couple of decades. I loved her, she loved me back. We didn't analyze why it worked because it just did. However, I am very glad that we didn't take our friendship for granted. I have no regrets, except that we didn't have a couple of more decades together. Peggy had definite ideas about many subjects. Anybody who spent even a little time with her would testify to that. That's one of the first things that engaged my attention when I first met her. She said what many of us thought but never dared say. Yet she was at heart painfully shy, and words were often difficult for her to find. When she knew she was very sick and she might not get well again, we had a talk about what approach I should take when I put down words to remember her. She was silent for a while, and then she said, "Tell everybody how much they all meant to me. Say that my husband and my kids and my grandkids were the family that God gave me, and that my friends were the family that I made by hand. Tell them that my life was shaped by the people I loved." I think these words sum up Peggy very well. She was a complex person, and at the same time, she was the simple salt of the earth. She loved her family, she loved her friends, she loved her country. She also loved dogs, a good bargain, and all things practical. She hated the cold and over-air-conditioned buildings. She scoffed at pretense and avoided what seemed artificial, contrived, and arrogant. She was fiercely loyal and protective of whatever and whomever she valued. I do know that Peggy was a natural storyteller, but you had to be patient if you wanted to piece together the anecdotes to make a consistent history. She mostly doled out her stories in little pieces in loose association with whatever conversation you happened to be having with her at the moment. She would begin by saying, "Did I ever tell you about?" And then she would go from there. She liked to drive in the car and talk, and one particular time we were on our way to a food bank during the holidays, the back of my station wagon loaded with frozen turkeys, and a couple of little kids in car seats behind us. She startled me by saying, "Did I ever tell you that I had a Swedish ancestor that was eaten by wolves?" I said, "No, Peggy, I would have remembered that." She continued, "A great-grandmother of one kind or the other. She must have had a family, though, or I wouldn't be here. But all they ever found was her cap, maybe a mitten." I waited for her to finish, and she finally ended her recitation with a rhetorical question. "What kind of idiot goes out alone in the dark in Sweden in the winter near a forest?" She really didn't want an answer, which is good, because I didn't have one at the moment. And the turkeys, being frozen, remained silent. I think back now, and 2010 is the year when the only sign of the zodiac was cancer. After fighting against this disease through Bowling for the Cure, and hating it as it took most of her siblings and even her sweet dog Pokey, Peggy discovered that she was harboring the enemy in her own body once more, her third bout during her adult life. She tackled the situation with her usual pragmatic, understated, and unsentimental determination. The news seemed huge, overwhelming, and not completely unexpected. But hearing the words and finally embracing the truth presented us all with a new reality. The unspeakable became the new normal, and we continued to try to grapple with the immensity of what was happening in the middle of the often mundane details of daily life. This past summer, she asked me outright, "Do you think it's more important how somebody lives or somebody dies?" I had to think for a while, and I said, "I think it's very important how somebody dies, because that event occurs while life is going on. Death is a part of life. She nodded her head and said, "I plan to be alive all the way." This fall, she said to me, "You know what's really annoying about having a terminal cancer diagnosis?" I asked, "Besides the obvious?" She replied, "Everybody gets tired of it and just wishes you'd hurry up and get it over with." I told her that everybody might get tired, and we did get tired because the burden of knowing seemed to weigh tons, but nobody wanted her to leave our midst. But leave us she finally did, and she began the last miles of her journey home on Christmas morning, in the season that we are reminded again that we have the gift of light in a world of darkness. And today, in the midst of a sunny day that still seems to be filled with shadows, we are called to be light for each other. There is no shadow so deep that it cannot be reached with the flame of courage and of faith. There is no despair so black that it cannot be penetrated by hope. Peggy knew these things and believed strongly in the healing power found in the shape and form of human love. This knowledge shaped her life and defined her death. Peggy prevailed no matter what. She never gave up, and she was one of the bravest spirits I have ever known. As that well-known philosopher John Wayne observed, courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. Her leaving left a void where the fullness of her earthly presence had been. It is an ache for all of us to treasure because it measures just how important she was to all of the ones who loved her and who will always love her. The Proverbs tell us that fear and courage are brothers. I know they are sisters, and they have made us all family here today. I would invite any of you who has something to share about Peggy to come up and replace me at the mic.